Hey, it's Tracie. Listen, Emily and I are working our tushies off to make this show profitable, or at least to break even. You can help without spending a dime. Positive reviews help other listeners find us. So please, take a moment and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Or if you're listening on Spotify, give us a rating. Thanks.
I'm not sure it's a good movie. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's not a good movie, but it is such an entertaining movie. And I think that world building through the cinematography, through the sets, through the costumes is part of what makes it so satisfying. Have you ever had something you love dismissed because it's just pop culture? What others might deem stupid shit, you know matters. You know it's worth talking and thinking about. And so do we. So come overthink with us as we delve into our deep thoughts about stupid shit. I'm Tracie Guy Decker, and you're listening to Deep Thoughts About Stupid Shit, because pop culture is still culture, and shouldn't you know what's in your head? On today's episode, I'll be sharing my deep thoughts about the 2003 movie Underworld with my sister, Emily Guy Birkin, and with you. Let's dive in. Listener, before we dive into Underworld, I'm going to ask you again, if you haven't yet, please take a moment and follow the show on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify or wherever you get your pods. It's a free way for you to help our show grow. Thanks. Now, Underworld. Emily, I don't know. Have you seen this movie?
I have, but I have only seen it once. And
What is in your head? What is in your head about this movie? I cannot wait to hear.
So what's in my head about this movie is mostly like 6 degrees of where have I seen that actor? So Kate Beckinsale, who I know is like the main character in this movie, I think when I saw it, I was like, how do I know her? And she played Hero in Much Ado About Nothing, the Kenneth Branagh Much Ado About Nothing that I love. So, and then I know Bill Nighy is in it as well, who was Billy Mack in Love Actually. I now know Michael Sheen is in it, but I did not know him at the time. I have since come to adore him. I remember it being a very blue movie. This was like, I feel like the beginning of when movies just turned blue.
You mean literally the color blue?
Literally the color blue. Yes, yeah, I don't mean like blue humor or anything like that. I mean, literally you're watching it and it's like, why is everything blue? I remember there's vampires. I remember there's black leather. That is about the extent of it. Like that's what I got. I also happen to know that this is how Michael Sheen and Kate Beckinsale met and that they have a child together. That's it. That's what I got. So it's not much.
All right. Well, regular listeners may know that I actually really love a vampire movie. Twilight being the exception.
Notwithstanding. Because it's not really a vampire movie.
Right. But just in general,
like allegory.
Right. Just in general, I love the genre. Like something about, I think it's the dramatic irony of it. Maybe it's because like I actually really love sort of the gothic aesthetic, even though I don't think I could pull it off myself. I don't know what it is, but I love a vampire story. And so this was on there because of that, because this was, one of those ones from the early 2000s that I adored it when it came out. Like I just thought it was the bee's knees in the early 2000s. I've seen it a couple times since. I have not actually seen, there are 4 total movies, and I've only ever seen the first one. I'm going to have to rectify that. So we are only talking about the first one, and things that maybe get resolved in future movies. I don't know. I didn't do any of that. Like I'm just talking about this one piece of media from 2003. So it turns out actually it's going to be sort of interesting in conversation with Highlander that we did just last episode. But that was why it was on the list. And like when we were planning last time, I was like, oh yeah, the vampire movie. I want to watch the vampire movie again. Nothing more complicated than that. So that's why we're talking about it today. I don't have a whole lot at stake, but I do love a good vampire movie. And I loved this one when it came out.
I remember that's how I ended up seeing it, because you were like, oh, you got to watch this. You got to watch this.
Yeah.
So
I will say on rewatch, this is not a good film. It is a very entertaining film, but it is not a good movie.
I have such fondness in my heart for those kinds of movies.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's part of why we do this project, right? I will say it's really interesting, like the pitch meeting. I imagine the pitch meeting for this movie. They were like, okay, picture it. The Matrix, but with vampires and werewolves. You with me? And like, that was the whole pitch. Like, that's the movie. The Matrix, but with vampires and werewolves.
Well, and that's why it looked blue, because the Matrix
It's blue.
is blue.
Yeah. So a couple postcards from the destination, and then I will do a quick synopsis, mainly of the characters, because really so much happens in this movie. If I tried to do from beginning to end in chronological order, it would be much longer than we have for this show. It is action-packed. So some of the things I want to discuss, I want to ask the question, is this a feminist movie? Because there are things about it that definitely are. And there are things about it, namely Kate Beckinsale's leather and corset outfit, which maybe aren't. Hot, yes. Feminist? I don't know. So I want to have that conversation. I want to talk about this movie as an allegory for interracial relationships. And I don't have a hot take. I want to tease that apart with you because I think it was intentional and I don't know how successful it was. I want to talk about the cinematography of this film because, especially after our conversation last week about Highlander, I watched this sort of hearing you in my voice going, senior film student. And there were a couple of moments that I definitely was like that, but also it's very entertaining. I actually think visually, this movie is gorgeous. So I want to have that conversation. And friend of the show, Ryan Cunningham, probably will take issue with that because she has such a clear eye of the framing and set design and all the things that I just don't see. So Ryan, please, I know you're listening. Let us know what I got wrong. We'll talk about gender because we have to. Kate Beckinsale in that leather outfit. We will talk about Michael Sheen because I love Michael Sheen.
All hail Michael Sheen.
And I want to talk a little bit about the moral ambiguity of a movie that's about a war between vampires and werewolves and who are you supposed to root for? So Roger Ebert hated this movie. He gave it 2 stars and he was like, by the end, I didn't even care who won, if it was the vampires or the werewolves. And I actually think, Roger, that was the point. You weren't everybody was a bad guy. So I want to talk about that a little bit. Before we get to all of those things, let me see if I can kind of remind you a little bit of the plot. So Kate Beckinsale's Selene is our narrator and also, I suppose she's our protagonist. She's certainly the main character. And so we get some narration from her, some exposition. We learn that vampires and lichens, which is this world building's name for werewolves, are at war, and they have been forever. Or for centuries, not forever, for centuries. Selene herself is what is called a death dealer. She is a warrior in this war, and it is her job to kill lichens, and she loves it. And she lets us know that the weapons have changed, but the task is the same. And at one point, there's this line that's kind of lame, but I don't know if it was the delivery or the writing, but she says, just like the weapons of the last century, we death dealers will soon be obsolete. Anyway.
Why will they be obsolete?
Because she's going to exterminate all the lichen.
Oh, I see. Okay.
She feels like it's that close. So there's all this backstory from centuries ago where the leader of the lichen, Lucian, died. He was killed. And that sort of ended the worst of the fighting. And since then, that was several hundred years ago. Since then, it really had all the lichen have been basically in hiding. And these death dealers have been seeking them out. That's all in exposition. And the first scene of the film, there's a lot of architectural Gothic things where she and another vampire look like gargoyles on the top of these spires and stuff. But then they drop down and there's this huge shootout in a subway with vampires and werewolves and running and jumping and acrobatics and
Parkour.
So many bullets. So from the beginning, it's heart pounding from the first 3 minutes of the film. Through the course of the film, we meet, so Selene was turned by Victor. He's one of 3 elders, and they have a thing that they call leapfrogging through time, where only one is awake. There are 3 of them in this, there are 2 covens ruled by these 3 elders. And only one of the elders is awake at a time. The others go into this sort of hibernation where they turn into these like desiccated whatever corpses. And so a century at a time, and then the next one wakes up. And so each of them is sleeping for 2 centuries and awake for 1 century. We learn pretty quickly that Lucian, who's supposedly dead, is not in fact dead. That's Michael Sheen. But the lichen are all living underground. And the visuals of this movie set up a huge dichotomy between these 2 species, and they call themselves species. The lichen live underground, and it's very gritty and dirty and like muted colors and like browns and grays and things and like dripping everywhere. It's very gritty. And the vampires live in a mansion with like luscious rugs, and they're all dressed very sexy, but very like luxe, with like lots of like corsets, and the men in these like velvet shirts, and it's very like lavish, yes, in the mansion where the vampires live, and like fancy cars and everything. And the head of the house right now, while Victor, who sired Selene, is sleeping or hibernating, whatever it is that they're doing when he's down in the thing. The head of the house while Victor's asleep is a vampire named Craven. And you can tell by his name, he's a villain. Craven wants Selene to be his partner, and she wants nothing to do with him. Like, she just is not interested in this dude. But he's like, I want you by my side. You're going to be my future queen. Like, all this stuff. Like, he's just like, will not take a hint. Like, this chick's not into you, dude. Erica, played by Sophia Myles, who I did that sort of 6 degrees, like while I was watching it this time, she wants to be the queen. Like, she is like, yes, me, hello, me. And she keeps trying to like get Craven's attention. And so there's it's not even a rivalry because Selene's not interested. Mm-hmm. So Erica has some feelings about Selene, but anyway. We also meet Michael, that's the character's name. He's played by Scott Speedman. He's human. And the lichen are tracking him. And Selene sort of figures out that these lichen are tracking this human. And she's like, something's weird. Why is this happening? And Craven's like, don't you worry your pretty head about it. And she's like, no, I'm not listening to you. Something's weird. And so she figures out that this guy is being tracked. And we learn through the course of like her trying to like, she's going to go get the human dude, Michael. And so she ends up in a shootout with this amazing scene that is iconic where she's like trapped. And so she has 2 pistols, guns, firearms that she's holding in each hand. And she shoots a circle around herself so that the floor falls down. And that's how she escapes. And it's amazing. Anyway.
It's a shame how much you don't like this film.
Michael, like, he gets caught and escapes and like all sorts of things happen. Finally, Lucian, Michael Sheen, says he has to do it himself. So he gets Michael and bites him and gets some of his blood in his mouth. And we learn that there's this legend of this man named Corvinus who somehow had this genetic mutation that allowed him to survive a plague. He had 3 sons. One became vampire, one became a werewolf, and one remained human. So this like common ancestor for all 3. So Lucian and the lichen have been seeking out a descendant, a human descendant, because they want to try and like merge the species. He wants to end the war by eliminating the difference. And so they have like a board, like a murder board sort of thing with all like the strings and stuff. So Michael's last name is Corvin, and it turns out he is a direct descendant of this original person. So they've been trying to get his blood because when lichen blood and vampire blood are put together, both die. So if a vampire were to bite a werewolf, he would die and vice versa. So that's like sort of going on the background. That's like world building and like creating the conflict in the plot. So meanwhile, Selene saves Michael from Lucian, Michael Sheen, but then Michael saves Selene because she gets injured and loses a lot of blood and passes out while driving, and they fall into a river, a lake, I don't know. So he saves her from the water. So now they've saved each other. So shenanigans ensue, and there's lots and lots of fighting. And then we learn that the man, Victor, the vampire who turned Selene, who she believes saved her from werewolves who killed her entire family, her mother, her father, her sister, and her sister's twin daughters, who were 6. She believes Victor saved her from them. And it turns out he's the one who killed them. And he didn't kill her because she reminded him of his daughter, Sonia. Sonia was married to Lucian. Sonia the vampire was married to Lucian, the werewolf. And when Victor, Sonia's father, discovered this and discovered that she was pregnant, he executed her in front of Lucian. So this is all backstory. Selene didn't know because it's forbidden to look into the past. So there's so many conspiracies. Craven also is the one who supposedly killed Lucian 600 years ago, but in fact he didn't. It was like an arrangement that they made. There's a romance, of course, between Michael and Selene because she's the badass. It's an action movie. And she's the star. So obviously she has to save a man and then fall in love with him because that's how these things work. So there's a romance between them, which some commentators have said is like totally flat and doesn't work. I actually did see the chemistry. And there was a moment where she asks about a picture she saw of Michael and another woman. And he tells a story about how she was his significant other, we don't know, wife or fiance or what, but like died in a car crash right next to him. Like he was unable to save her and she kept asking about it. So he watched her die. And then Selene tells the story about being saved and like her entire family. So they have that sort of shared background trauma. And then they go through trauma together. Mm-hmm. So I actually did believe the sort of romance between them. He's been bitten by a lichen, so he's going to turn into a lichen. So she's actually like, her job is to kill this guy. Mm-hmm. She doesn't want to because now she has feelings for him. The whole thing goes down underground in this gritty, it's always raining in this unnamed city where they are. And there's this huge fight between Selene, Victor, Michael, and Lucian. Craven runs away because that's who he is. Lucian is dying. He's been shot with a bullet that had like liquid silver in it. So it's in his bloodstream. So he is dying. And Michael has been shot as well by Craven. And Selene is like, all she cares about, like Craven's like, come on, come with me. And she's like, not, she doesn't even give him the time of day, like to look at him. She's just focused on Michael. He runs away when he realizes Victor's coming. And Lucian says, bite him. Lucian says to Selene, bite Michael because he has this special power. So she does. And he turns into this crazy black monster. And then there's a huge fight. Selene now knows that Victor is the one who killed her family. And he's like, yes, I took from you, but I gave you so much more. And there's this big choreographed fight between like Michael, who now has like black skin, not like brown skin like a human person that we call black, but like the color black, like blue black and like black eyes because he's both vampire and werewolf now. And like the violence of like the power of this choreographed fight scene is intense where like they throw each other against columns and like cement shatters. Sort of sounds like the Highlander thing with the sparks, except I believed it. And then like Victor seems to sort of be winning, but then Selene sees Victor's sword and she picks it up. And this is another iconic scene. This is the one that stayed with me. And she does this acrobatic flip where she jumps around and over him and he like stands up and faces her. Victor's facing Selene. They're probably 15 feet apart at this point, and he's just sort of blinking at her. And then she shows him that the sword has blood on it, and he sort of blinks, and blood sort of bubbles up in a line, a diagonal line from above his left ear, probably above one of his ears down to like below like his jawline on the other side, like a diagonal line. And then that top half of his head just sort of slides off.
Gross.
Yeah, gross. Like while he's still blinking at her. And then we see sort of the lichen are kind of like in the shadows. They had been sort of watching and they sort of recede. And the movie ends with she retrieves a necklace that had been Sonia's, the dead daughter. And we hear her kind of voiceover again, sort of saying, what happened tonight is going to reverberate for centuries, and now I'm going to become the hunted. There's a lot more. There's like one of the other vampire elders is ambushed that Craven arranged because he wanted to sort of take over. There's how we learn about Sonia being killed by Victor is because when lichen bites you, you kind of get some of their memories. And so Michael actually now remembers when Lucian had to witness his. So that becomes sort of a sympathetic moment between them, because Lucian is like a kidnapper, and like Michael Sheen's character, like in the beginning, you're like, do I like this guy? Is he sympathetic? But then the backstory makes him very sympathetic. He tells the story that we used to be enslaved. The werewolves used to be the slaves of the vampires. They were the daytime guardians. And he was born into servitude, and he wished them no ill will, even took a vampire as his bride. But then when Victor did what he did, like that was the start of the war. And so we see at one point when Michael and Selene are reunited, Michael says, I know what started the war, because he feels as though he was there because he had that memory. And we know that that memory passes on when Selene wakes Victor outside of the appropriate chain, like more than a century early. And it wasn't his turn. But she wants his guidance because she suspects Craven is guilty of something. And so to do that, she gives him some blood, this corpse, some blood. There's this whole like mechanism that's actually really neat, the way they thought it through. And with it comes his memories. And the reason they only have elders wake the other elders is because they have the skill to like, I don't know, somehow arrange their memories so that when the blood goes, it's like coherent. That's actually kind of interesting. She talks to herself in the mirror. She talks to Victor in the mirror so that he will have that memory. And so there's a lot in there that like, go watch the movie if this sounds at all interesting to you if you haven't seen it.
Come to think of it, I do remember Bill Nighy's character being like a betrayer. Like I remember that being like the plot twist of.
And it's a huge betrayal because she thinks of him as a father. That he saved her. Yeah. And that's why she's lived the way she's lived for centuries. And it was all a lie. Like he couldn't bear, like they had, the rules for the vampires is they only feed on livestock, but like he didn't like that. So every once in a while, Craven tells Selene this. Every once in a while, he would go out and binge on humans, and it was Craven's job to like clean up after him. And that's how Craven knows that this is the case. Yeah. So that's sort of the backstory, and there's so much more. If there are specific things that you need to know for the analysis, I'll bring them back, but I don't want to spend any more time there. That was enough. So let me start with where I started the postcards, which is this a feminist film? Here are the ways it is a feminist film. The vampire story, the trope, the kind of seed that we have is this powerful, seductive man who possesses in some way a submissive woman, right? Like that is the Dracula story. That was the fear that this like pure woman then becomes sort of seduced, and there's sexuality in it, but there's also like dominance and submission, and like all of that is kind of hovering around the vampire story.
Yeah, and there's the financial power as well.
The vampire, in the way we have received it, is powerful in so many ways. And that power is exercised over his female victim. Selene breaks all of that, right? Like, she is powerful. She's the one who holds the power. And even when the other vampire, Craven, is trying to exert his vampiric power over her, she's like, no, I don't, just no. Like, not even like, there is no apology. There's no like, oh man, I know. And like, I mean, she even says at one point to Victor, like, Craven will not leave me alone. Like, he's obsessed with me and I can't take it. And so that kind of like, frankly, more realistic. I mean, sometimes the attention is wanted. Erica would have loved to have Craven's attention in that way. But when it's not, it's not. And it's not like you get worn down and now love him, which is what we're often given, you know?
I don't know if the listeners could not hear my eye roll, although I feel like it should have been audible considering how big it was.
I mean, we get that story so often, right?
So often.
Selene like just blows through that with her giant gun. You know, like she's just no. And so in that subversion, by making her a vampire and making her, you know, this way, and she's like extremely sexy. I mean, so friggin' sexy, but not interested in the sort of dominant male at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that sense, I feel like there is a certain amount of feminism. There's a feminist impulse, at least, even just as powerful as she is, like physically powerful. And the way that she like defies convention and defies the rules of this man feels really powerful. Here's the way it's not feminist. It does not pass Bechdel test. Or if it does, it just squeaks by. So there are two other named female characters. Amelia, who's one of the other elders who does not speak. She only dies. And Erica, who I've mentioned. And they do talk to one another. Erica and Selene do talk to one another, but almost exclusively about men, either Craven or Michael. There's like one line where Erica's like, come on, we need to get you dressed for the party. Or you should wear this dress. Like, so they do talk about a dress. But like, yeah, it's like, I sort of feel like maybe Alison Bechdel would be okay with me adding that to her test. Like, are there at least two named female characters? Do they talk to each other? And do they talk to each other about something other than a man, a boy, or what they're wearing?
Or makeup.
Like, I feel like maybe Alison Bechdel would be okay with me adding that. Yeah. So in that way, it's not feminist. It also, like, she's so sexy. Like, she is a walking sex object, Kate Beckinsale, in this movie. Like, they have her poured into this leather or maybe vinyl, like, cat suit and then a corset over top. It is hot. I mean, like, it is really hot. And so her power comes with this objectification. And I think regular listeners will know that I do not believe that sexuality or, like, showing female sexuality is anti-feminist. But it definitely feels like male gaze with Kate Beckinsale in this movie.
Yeah.
The other thing is, as I sort of mentioned before, like, it's an action movie starring a woman, so of course she's going to save a man and fall in love with him. Like, this is, I don't know if anybody else is using this phrase, but you and I sometimes will talk about the love-struck should be leader or hero. The love-struck should be leader. Like, Trinity is one in The Matrix, which it makes sense now that Kate Beckinsale, because this is definitely a Matrix ripoff. And in the Lego movie Wild Style, I think Hermione eventually becomes one.
Yeah, Hermione is one.
She's not love struck from the beginning, but eventually, she goes for Ron. What? Anyway, sorry, that's an aside. This is a trope that happens, I think, where you have this super capable
Princess Leia.
Yeah. You have this super capable woman who should be the leader, but instead she is the love interest for the leader, and she like supports and saves his leadership. So she falls into that trope, and that doesn't feel feminist to me.
So you're saying that she's the love-struck would-be leader. Who is the leader? Is it Michael?
Yeah. I mean, he's the sort of like chosen one.
Chosen one? Okay.
Yeah. So he is not a leader sort of by the end of the movie. There kind of isn't one. She's destroyed Victor. Craven has run off.
And Lucian's dying.
Lucian's dead. He dies. Lucian dies. So
and the third elder has already died too, right?
No, there is a third elder. The movie actually ends, this sets up for the next movie beautifully, which I really need to go watch it. They killed one of the like elder Lycan who had been helping with this experiment to find Michael Corvin. They killed him in the kind of sleeping chambers. And so we see that his blood, the Lycan's blood, like drips down to the final elder who's still living, Marcus. And we see his eyes open.
Like an elder.
No, the final vampire elder. The Lycan elders don't sleep. The vampire elders. It's 3 vampire elders who leapfrog through time.
Gotcha.
So, and we see his eyes open. So Marcus is being awakened by werewolf blood. And the werewolf memories will come with that. So who knows? Whoever's seen the next movie knows. I don't know how that's going to play out because I haven't seen the next movie. But they do set that up really beautifully, I think, you know, in terms of like satisfying storytelling anyway, because it was unintentional. They have like Selene killed the guy. Selene brought him and was like interrogating him to prove to Victor, because Victor was still believing Craven. So she like catches this Lycan and brings him to the chamber. So Michael, though, is the chosen one. they don't use that terminology. But because he has this special blood, you know.
That's what he represents in the story.
He represents the chosen one because now he is the first of the new hybrid species, which Lucian had been working for. So the other thing that I want to bring up in the question of, is this a feminist movie? It doesn't pass Bechdel, but there are a lot of unnamed female vampires that we see. Many. We don't see a single female werewolf. Not one. And I have to think, I read this and it just really rings true. Some commentator was like, I have to imagine that hairy women was a thing that movie execs were like, nah, don't do that. And given the way Kate Beckinsale and all the other vampires, female vampires, look in this movie, like, yep, that's what happened. They were like, female werewolves, not sexy. Let's not have any. You know, because there's this one scene in the very beginning when we first meet Lucian in person. The werewolves, they're underground and they're like having a fight club, but like as werewolves. Because when they've been werewolf long enough, they can turn at will. They don't need the moon. So they're like having like a fight club as werewolves. And so he comes in, like shoots a shotgun in the air and was like, you're behaving like rabid dogs. And there's these two very well-built men who've been fighting. They're like got little blood scratches and stuff, looking sheepish. And he says their names, I don't remember. And he says, put some clothes on. And we can see that like the camera angle ends like very strategically. Like there's a line like right at like where that like the V of the thigh gap and a little maybe I saw a hint of pubic hair on one of my, maybe, I don't know. Michael Sheen pulls it off so beautifully. I was like, oh, you little devil. He like, his eyes dart down and then back up and he says, put some clothes on. So male werewolves can be sexy, but obviously female werewolves can be sexy. So that's another thing that like, I'm extrapolating a little bit, but I'm willing to say like, that's like a not feminist thing about this movie that like we couldn't get any female werewolves. So like, there's tension here. Like Selene is a badass. She's amazing. And like in many ways subverts patriarchy and like literally beheads it. And in other ways, she falls right into it, you know, with this like poured into this leather outfit, you know? So anyway, I think that's enough.
I do want to stick with this for a second.
Okay.
So one thing I'm thinking about is the way that vampires, like the metaphor that vampires represent in our culture. And this is partially because I believe Bram Stoker himself was not necessarily heterosexual, is vampires represent kind of degenerate sexuality in our culture. And so the fact that there is the idea that vampires prey on defenseless women, but within the original Dracula story, Dracula also preyed on Jonathan Harker. And there is that sense of predation, of like gay male predation as well. And so I kind of want to stick with this just a little bit and kind of tease out like the kind of queer lens of this as well. Added to that, something that's interesting to think about werewolf mythology is if you consider the fact that werewolves are associated with the moon.
Sort of feminine energy, maybe?
Feminine energy, periods, because they turn into a monster once a month. And so the fact that these wolves are all male is interesting. And then the fact that our protagonist's name is Selene, which means moon.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And so like all of that together is very interesting. And the leather add to that is also kind of...
Well, I'm glad you brought up the fact that vampires are often associated with sort of degenerate sexuality or sexuality in general, because that definitely is the case with these vampires in this film, right? Like there's a scene where Erica tries to sort of seduce Craven, and you know it's very tame by today's standards. Like she ends up topless, but we don't actually see anything, and she's sitting on his lap, but they both still have pants on, but they're like making out, and he bites her neck. Which is that cool when you fight another vampires? Anyway, so the sexuality piece of it, it's really interesting that you brought that in because the vampires in this film definitely read as sexual. There is a sense that all of these vampires who live in this coven are having sex with one another. We don't see that. It's just sort of like
Implied.
yeah. And versus the werewolves who are all male. And the homoeroticism is in these fights or a fight that we see between them. So that's there, but it's all of the subversions are really interesting because you're pointing out that the werewolf kind of becomes sort of associated with women and we've got only male werewolves. And there is a homoeroticism to the fight scene, especially with Michael Sheen's acting choices. The way he looks,
God, I love that
down.
man.
And yet it's also couched in almost a hyper masculinity with the fighting. And they were doing it like a bunch of other guys were watching in their human forms and like goading them on in that very, very early fight scene. So that's sort of an interesting thing. And I also think I was telling my physical therapist actually this morning that I had watched this movie to do this thing. And she says, I fell in love with Kate Beckinsale in that movie. She's so hot in that movie. So, you know, when you say like, are a queer lens for this, it's interesting too. Like I read Beckinsale's costume design as male gaze, but it's worth sort of taking a beat and saying like, yeah, and she is desired by this male vampire, like deeply desired by him, but you know, there's nothing there. Like her only friend seems to be Michael, but she and Erica do seem to have some kind of, like at one point Erica like helps her escape because Craven has her on lockdown and Selene says, why are you helping me? And Erica says, I'm not. I'm helping myself. So, like, the surface read is that Erica's getting her rival out of the way. And we definitely see that. But there's also something of a, I think, more than that between the two women, some sort of friendship or something. So, anyway, thank you for keeping us with this.
Yeah. I mean, to what your physical therapist said, there could be a read that Kate Beckinsale, her character is queer as well, in that she falls for someone who is not like her.
And who is forbidden.
Who is forbidden, yeah. So in the same way that the daughter that she was created to replace, also was queer.
Yeah, let's jump to the daughter. Let's talk about the daughter, because I think that there's a degree to which this was intended as an allegory about interracial relationships. Like Victor, Bill Nighy's character says, I loved my daughter, but the abomination that was growing in her womb, I could not allow to exist. I did what I did for the species. And he says that's what he's going to do now when he kills Michael. And so, you know, you don't have to be a film critic to sort of see that, right? And noble, I guess, you know, that they wanted to do that. They made this man very much the villain for having policed the interspecies relationships the way that he did. It's very clear. The movie makers make it very clear that he's in the wrong. And it's sort of an interesting, like, is this a useful allegory, really? Like, there are no female werewolves. As far as we can see.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure like where to go with it. Cause like the backstory is really at the individual level, at the personal level that Lucian was forced, he was in chains to watch his beloved die. It's a powerful story. When we zoom out as an allegory, right? Like with the servitude and where they are now, you know, with the lichen living underground in very like muddy, dirty, sewer type, you know, areas versus the vampires up in the mansion. There are layers to it, which if we are taking it as allegory, like it's complicated. It's complicated. I'm not sure how I feel about it. And, you know, they're very careful. The casting was very careful. There are Black werewolves, Black people playing werewolves, and there are Black people playing vampires. We have both. We even have a couple of, at least one Asian vampire. So they were very careful. I mean, our main characters are all white, but, you know, sort of the supporting characters are multiracial. And in fact, like the number 2 werewolf is played by Kevin Griveau. He's like that really big guy, big black guy with like a really deep voice.
One of those 6 degrees of where do I know that actor?
Yeah. He might be the Green Mile guy. Anyway, I never saw the Green Mile. And then one of the vampires who Selene trusts, who's like the weapons expert guy, is a black actor. So, which only supports my sense that this being an allegory about interracial relationships was on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So I don't know that I have anywhere else to go with this. I'm not sure it holds up, but I appreciate that they tried. I actually do. And like, as I say, in the individual characters, I do think it's really powerful story. So
it's kind of like in the way Zootopia was trying to be an allegory. It's one of those where any allegory falls apart if you look too closely at it and can be a little offensive if you take it to its logical conclusion.
Because it creates an essentialism, like because race is made up.
Yes.
Race is made up.
Yes.
But the difference between a vampire and a werewolf, okay, that's made up. But in the world building of this universe of this film, it's not made up.
Yeah.
There are like real biological differences.
Yes.
And so it's like Land Before Time, right? Like Daddy Triceratops was right. Triceratops don't play with long necks because they lived at different time periods, right? Like there actually is a measurable scientific difference. Yeah. I know I'm saying scientific difference about vampires and werewolves, but within this movie, there's a lot of science, actually. There is a lot of science within this movie, whereas there is no measurable scientific difference between the races. And so the allegories, like, actually, in some ways, the allegory reifies the racism.
Yes.
Because it implies the difference is more substantial than it truly is. Racism is real. Like, racism is measurable. Race is not. And so I think that. Thank you for pushing me to articulate that a little bit more clearly.
Yeah. And so, like, that doesn't make allegories useless.
Right. Absolutely.
It's just, when filmmakers and storytellers do have these allegories, that we need to, like, push back on them somewhat to be like, okay, this is helpful, but we need to know where the end of the helpfulness is.
Yes, precisely. That's precisely it. Okay, I want to spend a couple minutes talking about the cinematography in this film because it's actually really fun. And like the pitch meeting that I named at the beginning, like for reals, like The Matrix meets Vampires and Werewolves. Like there are several moments that are used that sort of slow motion, like close up kind of action or of bullets.
Bullet time is what they call it.
Is that what they call it? That was, I think, invented by
It was the Wachowski sisters. Yeah,
the Wachowski sisters in the Matrix movies. Like, it's not precisely bullet time because it's not but it's like sort of reminiscent of that. There are a couple of moments where we actually, like, the camera, I'm putting quotes around that, goes inside the body. And there's like CG of like when the vampire is waking up, we see the heart start to beat and like the tissue start to expand. Or like when Michael is first starting to turn his first time, the camera, again, quotes, goes inside his body and we see his ribs, like the bones actually expanding and it's cut between like him like writhing and like pulling up a shirt to look at his rib cage and like these inner workings. Or there's several scenes that are from the POV of a werewolf like stalking Selene. So kind of like blurry around the edges. Like, I don't know what that's called, like, but that sort of vignette focus, like around, like, and a little shaky camera work around corners and stuff. I don't know. I'm not a cinematographer. I don't know if that's good, but it works. Like, my heart was pounding. It really worked. And so I just want to name that, like, the movie makers committed to the goth. And like, it is deeply entertaining. Like, the movie opens on Selene, like, sort of half squatting in this like skin tight leather up on the ramparts of like a church or something they all wear like duster coats, like long duster coats. And so she's wearing one and it's sort of flapping in the wind and it's awesome. It's so beautiful. It's like, I mean,
Inspires thousands of Halloween costumes that year.
she, like, Beckinsale in the outfit is hot, but that's not what that moment, that scene, that visual is not actually about the sex appeal.
Mm-hmm.
It is sexy, but that's not, I don't think, the primary note. It's gothic is the primary note.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something like deeply satisfying about the like gothic architecture and this leather-clad woman and the sort of flapping in the like what's moving and what's not and the different textures and the like the blueness of it, as you named. It's just really, really beautiful. And the world building that is achieved through the cinematography, and it's in part through the story, but it's also through the cinematography, I think. And the sets were incredible. The sets, the cinematography create this world building that is just, I found it deeply compelling. Roger Ebert hated it. So maybe you have to have a certain sort of like aesthetic to appreciate it. But it's this unnamed city that like, you're like, is it New York? Maybe it's New York. But the cars have license plates that look more like Europe. But they're driving on the driver's side is on the correct side for Americans.
So it's not London.
It's not London, but like it could be London, like with these narrow streets and there's some water. And the accents, right? Like they all have different, like the vampires all have different accents. Like I think Craven sounds American. And I think Erica sounds American, but like all the others sound different kinds of British. So it does create this other universe for you through all of these different factors that, as I said, like, I'm not sure it's a good movie. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's not a good movie, but it is such an entertaining movie. And I think that world building through the cinematography, through the sets, through the costumes is part of what makes it so satisfying, that world building piece of it. The last thing I want to talk about that I haven't yet is the moral ambiguity, right? Like you make a movie about a war between vampires and werewolves. Who are the good guys, right? Both of them feed on humans, right? And interestingly, like we actually don't see them. We don't see them hurt humans mostly. A little bit. But the humans who get hurt in this movie are kind of caught in the crossfire. They're not actually the intended targets of any of the violence. So they're killing each other. And it's a high body count. Like a lot of vampires and werewolves die in this movie. A lot. And so, you know, when...
Are werewolves immortal in this?
Yes.
Like vampires? Okay.
Yes. In fact, so they are vulnerable to silver, but they can regenerate if they can get it out. So, in fact, at one point, like Selene takes Michael to a house where they do interrogations, she says. So she thinks it'll be safe. And they're like, there's evidence of like operations and like bullets in a pan. And he's like, what's all this? She says, well, if we leave the silver in, then they die before we can get any answers. So we take the bullets out, well, you know, for the interrogation. And then he's like, well, what do you do when the interrogation's over? She says, we put the bullets back in. Which I like saw coming and still enjoyed that she said it. So I feel like Roger Ebert in his contemporaneous review when he was like, I don't know who I was supposed to be rooting for and I really didn't care, you know, vampires or werewolves in this war. And like, I think that Roger Ebert like missed the point. Mm-hmm. Like, I think that actually is kind of the point. I think that's sort of what was interesting to the movie makers because it has a noir vibe to it. And there are no good guys in noir. Right? Mm-hmm. Like, I think that's, especially with her voiceover, like it's like gothic Matrix noir with vampires and werewolves. I really wish I could have heard the pitch meeting. So, you know, I think that moral ambiguity is actually inherent to the story. I think that's part of why you tell a vampire and werewolf story. Lucian, Michael Sheen's character, is the most sympathetic character, even more so than Selene, because we get the sense that he was just trying to live his life with his beloved, and then like
he was thrust into being a villain.
Yeah, and you never really get the sense that it's villainy. Like once you understand what's motivating him, it always feels like he's working towards something, and there are consequences but there's no cruelty in him.
Mm-hmm.
Unlike all of the other characters, I think, aside from Michael, the human, who becomes both. So Michael Sheen's Lucian and Scott Speedman's Michael are the only two who have no cruelty within them. So of course you don't know who you root for, Roger. They're all bad guys. That's the point. And that's sort of what's, I think, meant to be interesting. So
one of the things I find tragic about vampire stories is and why I get frustrated by Twilight is turning a human into a vampire is a tragedy.
Right.
And it should be treated as such because it turns them into
a monster,
a cruel monster. Yeah.
Right. And, it's interesting that you say that too, because there's a moment where Selene is like, how could you have done this to me? How could you have done this and then taken my trust after what you did? And he's like, yeah, I took from you, but I gave you so much more. I gave you immortality. Isn't that worth it? And the viewer's like, no, to your point, to exactly your point.
Yeah.
So yeah, Roger, you got it. Good job. So
I saw 3 other movies that day. So
no doubt. So those were the things I wanted to talk about. I definitely have some stuff for the shit we forgot to say. So listener, if you are not yet a patron, head on over to our Patreon and you can hear more about Underworld in our extra patron exclusive shit we forgot to say bonus. Before that, let me just remind you of what we talked about. So feminist? ? There's a lot of things that are feminist about this movie. The ways in which Selene undermines the tropes of the vampirism myth that has this very powerful man exert power over a vulnerable woman. She blows that out of the water. She literally decapitates patriarchy. She is also the object of our gaze as an object. The object of our gaze as an object. That's kind of a... Anyway, she also should be the leader and is instead this sort of love-struck support for the chosen one. And that sort of subverts the feminist move. She is a badass feminist. She doesn't have any female friends and doesn't talk to any other named women about anything other than a man or her dress. Not feminist. So that's sort of going on there. We talked about this as an allegory of interracial relationships and the ways in which that is helpful and the edges of the helpfulness, namely that race isn't real, but the difference between, at least in this movie, the difference between vampires and werewolves is real. And in fact, under a microscope, you can see it. You brought in sort of the queer lens and the ways, what happens when we use a queer lens to look at this. Is Selene is she queer in some way because she loves someone who is forbidden, who is not expected? Was Lucian and Sonia, were they queer since they loved across a forbidden line? And also, there's some homoeroticism among the vampires. There's some potentially, I wouldn't use this word, but sort of degenerate sexuality among the vampires, which comes with the trope. I talked a bit about the cinematography, which I just found delightful. The cinematography, the set design, the costume design, all working together to build this world that is immersive and, for someone who likes that sort of suspension of disbelief, really entertaining. I landed on moral ambiguity, and that's sort of why I would characterize this maybe as a noir film, because there are no good guys. There are only 2 people who are truly not cruel. One of them dies. The other becomes a hybrid human vampire werewolf. Not sure that's a happy ending. And of course, Michael Sheen. The man is a treasure.
The man, the myth, the legend.
What are you bringing me next week, Em?
Next week, I'm bringing you my deep thoughts on The Sixth Sense.
Oh,
yeah,
well, that's something a little different.
Mm-hmm.
This show is a labor of love, but that doesn't make it free to produce. If you enjoy it even half as much as we do, please consider helping to keep us overthinking. You can support us at our Patreon. There's a link in the show notes. Or leave a positive review so others can find us. And of course, share the show with your people. Thanks for listening. Our theme music is Professor Umlaut by Kevin MacLeod from incompetech.com. Find full music credits in the show notes.
Thank you to Resonate Recordings for editing today's episode.
Until next time, remember, pop culture is still culture. And shouldn't you know what's in your head?